today we're going to talk about facades in different climates, because not all facades are created equal and all climates are different and require different things. So, and people ask me about sustainability and design, and they always wondered why I don't cover it in my channel. But the reason why I don't cover it because it's such a complex topic. But today I'm going to attempt to simplify it a little bit, but still have it relevant to design and principles and things that we've covered in this channel before. Okay, so we're going to talk about climates first, and I'm just going to go over the main climates. In architecture, at least, when we talk about climates, we have 4 different climates. We're talking about hot and arid climate, and this is the climate that you will, for example, find in Southern California, you'll find it in Mexico, you will find it in Morocco, where I'm originally from, you will find it in Greece, for example. So all these areas have very hot and arid climate, meaning very, very hot summers with almost no rain, and it's just very dry and deserty like. Second climate is hot and humid climate, and for this one you'd want to think like Miami, Florida, think Hawaii, think Singapore, all these areas where the air is already hot, but not only that, it's also very thick and humid where you're just like, I cannot breathe. Third climate would be temperate climate, where you have moderate summer and moderate winter. You want to think like Northern California, for example. You would want to think some parts of Europe, maybe like France might be moderate. I'm not sure, but I think. And then the fourth one would be cold climate, and this one you want to think Alaska, maybe Canada, maybe Scandinavian countries like in Sweden, Norway, all that northern part where it's extreme winter, and then summer is, summer is not that extreme, so we don't really have to account for it. But anyways, so because again this is a very complicated topic, I'm gonna try to just scratch the surface and just very simplify it to a very basic level. So when we talk about hot arid climate, so let's start with this one because this one is tricky. Hot arid climate is, if you been to Mexico or you've been to Southern California or like Morocco, Mediterranean, you know that in the summer you are not supposed to open your windows in the afternoon, because it's just, you're gonna get hit by this heat wave, and all you're gonna be doing is just actually moving in more hot air inside the house. So for hot arid climate, you do not want to have big windows. What you want to do instead is you want to have very thick walls, and I'm sharing screen here, so you will probably notice this is like in New Mexico, Albuquerque. You would notice these super thick adobe walls that are out of mud because they serve a purpose. The thick walls, actually, let me do a quick diagram here. So let's say you have a thick wall, and this is called like a thermal storing thick wall, whereas let's say this is 12 p.m. in the afternoon and it's in the middle of July, and then outside is probably, I don't know, 120 Fahrenheit, like in Celsius, let's say it's like 45 degrees Celsius. It's extremely hot. And inside you want to kind of keep it a little bit moderate. You want to try to keep it like around 22 Celsius or maybe 68 Fahrenheit. So we don't want to open any windows. So windows, first of all, need to be extremely small and tiny. You don't want to have big giant glass that will just move all that hot air in. And also you want to have the thick wall, because the thick wall is going to store that heat. So you got the sun that's just glaring down, so the sun is coming down, and because the wall is thick, that heat is going to slowly but surely make its way to the inside of the house at around 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. when it gets cold at night. Because in the hot and dry arid climate, you have this giant swings of temperature where you're going from very hot during the day and then extremely cold during the night. So you want that wall to store that heat and only giving it to the interior when it's needed. So this is a very smart way of passive cooling, passive heating, because a lot of people didn't have AC. I mean, actually nobody had AC back then, so they had to find these natural ways, which is like a vernacular architecture, of making these adobe looking houses, because this house, and it feels so cool. If you actually been to inside one of these in the summer, inside it has like this super it's not like the AC. I don't even like AC because the cold of the AC is just too cold for my body, but this one is a very gentle coolth at night, heat at night, and then during the day it's just a gentle cool. So it goes very well with the body temperature, and the body tends to really like that kind of temperature swings. So there are some modern ways that you can do that. You can see here you have very thick walls, very minimal windows. This again, I got these. This is from New Mexico, Albuquerque. I'm sure you find them probably also in Mexico. This is one in Mykonos. You can see how they also have very small windows with very thick walls, but they also use light colors because light colors tend to not absorb all the heat, because all you want to do in hot arid climate is just keep the heat away from the inside of the house. That's the main important thing. Also courtyards. Actually, this is something that we have in Morocco, and I was born and raised in Morocco until 17, and I didn't know that actually courtyards serve a climate purpose. I always thought it was more of a cultural thing, which it is, but I think the main thing is because when you have a hot arid climate, you don't want to open up a lot of windows to the outside, but you want it to open up to the inside, because you have 4 walls creating all this shadow inside that courtyard, and that courtyard tend to be so cool during the day, and you're not getting a lot of heat from the outside walls, and all your windows are getting light from that courtyard. And a bonus point, if you add a little fountain there, you can have this evaporative cooling, because the air is really dry in this hot arid dry climate. So that evaporative cooling, it's gonna create a little bit of coolness. Is that the word? If that's a word, I don't know. Coolness to the space. And this is, now it's more of a Riyadh looking, vacation hotel thing, but it really does serve a purpose. And it's fascinating to me how architecture throughout the years, they just learn how to survive in such a harsh climate. And then you can also, they do things that are, it's called musharabia, I believe, where you want to just shade all the windows as much as possible. And if you can avoid opening windows on the south and the east and the west, almost just avoid opening windows in general. But if you want to do it in the north, I think the north breeze will really help cool the space a little bit. So, ooh, that was a lot. So that was pretty much for the hot arid climate. Now I'm gonna move to the hot humid climate. And hot humid climate is, like I said, is Miami, is Hawaii, is all these super thick air, and I just cannot stand hot humid climate. But what you want to do in hot humid climate is you just want to let the building breathe. If everything we were trying to do in the hot arid climate is to suffocate the building, to not let any air from the outside in, because we want to keep our cool inside, for hot humid climate we want to do the opposite. We just want to open it up and just let the building breathe, because the biggest issue with a hot humid climate is all the moisture that's in the air, and it's gonna just turn into a mold, and that's even a bigger problem. So what you want to do for hot humid climate, you want to have as many openings as you can, as big as you can, and you can have high ceiling as you can, a lot of fans and cross ventilation. Whatever air comes in, you need to let it out. It has to go out, otherwise it's just gonna bring all that moisture with it from the outside, and you're just gonna sit inside your space or your house, and you're just gonna turn into a mold, which you don't want that. So you will see a lot of these houses, like in Singapore or something, they have all these breathable skin facades, because again, you just want to let the air in and let it out. It also rains. That's the tricky part, because it rains there a lot, so you still want to let all that air come in even while it's raining. So if you can have those windows that are called jalousie windows, where they're horizontal lines where you can let all the breeze in even while it's raining, so you don't have to ever have to close your windows completely. They use a lot of overhangs, because you want to extend the overhang so you're not getting all the sun glaring at your openings, so at least you want to provide some of that shade. And then you will just see a lot of openings and like really high ceilings, and even here, like you can see the roofs, they angle the roof because it just helps with the cross ventilation, because as much as you have, windows at the bottom, windows at the top, and then the air goes like this, it just sucks air, and then hot air tends to rise. So you just want whatever that hot air comes from it carries that hot air from your space, and then it exits out of the building. So that's pretty much about hot and humid climate. I think I do want to mention one more thing about that, is when you have a facade that's facing west, you do want to use vertical slats, because the sun, the sun is very low, and then it's not gonna hit through, and it's not gonna go through the glass or whatever the opening you have. If you have a south facing facade, you're gonna get a lot of afternoon noon sun, which is really high, so you do want to have a lot of horizontal so the sun is not going to be able to go through. So just a quick tip based on what facade you are facing. Okay, so now I'm going to move to temperate climate. Temperate climate is, they're the lucky people. They can do whatever they want. They don't have any extreme harsh weather, and for, you know, design, you can do whatever. You can have more openings, you can have balconies, you can have protruding things, you can have any type of material as well on the facade. But one thing that you can do for temperate climate is that during the summer, you would want to have some shade. But during the winter, you still do want to get some of that sun because the winter can tend to be a little bit cold. So what you can do if you have a south-facing facade, for example, you can plant deciduous trees, meaning trees that have no leaves during the winter. So if you have trees that have no leaves during the winter, the sun can just filter through it and go inside your house. But during the summer, those trees are going to grow the leaves, so when the sun is going to try to get inside your house, it's going to create some shade and it's going to protect you from that sun. But that's not the case if you have coniferous, like non-deciduous trees, basically trees that do not have leaves that die. You can think of pine, you can think of cypress. These trees tend to be evergreen all year round, so it's gonna cast a lot of shadow. If during the winter you do want some of that sun, but it's gonna cast that shadow, so it's gonna make your house even more colder during the winter, which we don't want that. So skip non-deciduous trees if you have a south-facing facade and you do want some of that sunlight during the winter and some of that shade during the summer. Quick tip. I hope this is all making sense, because this is the reason why I kind of avoid talking about sustainability, because it gets a little bit sciencey. You're talking about east, west, south, whatever, and people tend to zone out because the topic is too complex. So I try to keep my channel a bit too beginner friendly, but anyhow. So now we're gonna move to cold climate. So cold climate is exactly the opposite of the hot arid climate. We do want to keep the cold air out, and we want to keep all the heat inside to ourselves. And it uses the same concept where you do want to have a very boxy shape. You don't want to expose a lot of walls, and you know how like an L shape, because an L shape, let me draw here. So if you have an L shape, you have one wall, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 6 walls that are exposed to the exterior, that are all bringing in all this cold, and they're just bringing in all this harsh winter. But if you have just a boxy, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, just 4 walls that are exposed to the exterior. So you want to minimize how many walls you are exposed into the exterior. And you will notice this a lot in Scandinavian countries. In Alaska, they have this boxy looking, in Germany too, this boxy looking houses. Very small windows, again, we don't want to lose that heat. And they, of course, pitch roof because it rains, it snows a lot. And the thing with this climate is that you're gonna get a lot of harsh wind during the winter, so you do want to know where that wind is coming from, and that where you can have your non-deciduous trees. For example, you can have your big pine trees, you can have your big cypress trees, and it's just gonna create this windbreaker, so you're not getting all that extra cold that's coming from the wind directly into your house. Also, what you can do is when you're laying out your plan, you can put your parking, you can put your car garage, you can also put, you know, storage or any room that's not used very often as that first line of defense. So when there is all that wind coming through, it's going through your garage, and then it's not directly affecting your like living space where you're probably having your fireplace and you're like doing all this work to heat it, and then that wind is just gonna gush it through. So I think it's a very good way to know where you're orienting your house. If you have a big lot, a lot of times you don't have the option of orienting your house a certain way, but it's worth knowing at least. Another thing that you can do for the windows in these cold climates is a high solar gain glazing, where you're trying to absorb all that sun that you're getting from the south facade, and the glass is letting the sun in and the heat in, but it's not letting the heat out. So you have a very special glazing that you can use. It is a little bit more expensive, but if you're more into like energy efficiency and having a house that's sustainable, I think that's a really good option. Okay, so I think these are the main 4 types of climates and how they affect the architecture of the region. And I think a best way of studying this is actually going back and looking at the vernacular architecture and what the native people used to do, because they all used natural material and they just learn how to live with that weather and that climate throughout the years. And I think they've done a really great job at that, because right now with architects of this era, we just, oh, okay, so it's cold, we're just gonna have heating, and you just like have this giant ducts bring in all that heat. Or, oh, okay, it's hot, we're just gonna bring in some cooling, we're just gonna do all AC and we're just using more electricity, and it's just not sustainable and it's not very energy efficient. So I think the best way is learn from these people that have done it before. And I think when I didn't know about courtyards and the thick walls and all that until I was in architecture school, until I was in the 4th year, and we had a class where one of our teachers said, well, why don't you guys, everybody from their country, they're gonna study the vernacular architecture. And that's when I learned about all these things, because nobody talks about these things, and just like, okay, yeah, just blast the AC. Like, well, I'm not gonna sit here try to think about all these thickness and walls and stuff. But if you are very sustainably driven, if you feel like you have a passion and you feel like you do want to do this for the planet, I think it's very fascinating things to learn, and I still learn a lot about it to this day. But it's just fascinating to me. That's pretty much all I could say about this. So anyways, I hope you learned something about vernacular architecture, about facades and climates. If you enjoyed this video, leave me a like, share, subscribe, like, do all the stuff. And of course, I'm gonna, again, as usual, leave a PDF summary down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!